At the start of our story, we see an old man coughing and muttering, "I am an earthling from a civilized society. I came from a civilized society." Just then, a little girl enters his home carrying food. Seeing him in such a condition, she says, "Mr. Seo, are you okay? My mother sent this for you." We learn the old man's name is Seo. He thanks the girl. As she places the food on the ground, she replies, "It's not a problem. Please get well soon and make more soap." With that, she leaves, walking back toward her home through the snowstorm. This old man, Seo, once a CEO, is indeed an earthling and inhabitant of a highly civilized world. It has been 50 years since he fell into this cursed realm. He and several company employees, including Director Kim, were on their way to a workshop when a sudden landslide swept them away. When they awoke, they found themselves in a bizarre world, one filled with towering, three-tailed foxes, massive two-headed snakes, and sword-wielding warriors who soared through the sky. It was like one of the martial arts novels Seo occasionally read. Most of his colleagues adapted surprisingly well to this new world, except him. Among the 7 who fell into the martial world that day, their destinies unfolded rapidly. Within just 3 days, ethereal, sage-like beings descended from the skies and were astonished by his colleagues' mythical talents. Each of them was taken away except for Seo and Director Kim. They had hoped that they too would be chosen or discover some hidden ability. But neither had any unique talent. With no knowledge of this world, they could do little else but manual labor. For 6 months, they worked menial jobs in a bustling marketplace just to eat. Then one day, Director Kim had enough. He spent all his savings on a third-rate martial arts manual sold on the street. Everyone mocked him, but within 3 months, he had mastered it and became a full-fledged martial artist. He told Seo that he couldn't keep living like this and spent all his money on a third-rate martial arts book being sold on the streets. Everyone laughed at him. But within 3 months, he mastered it and became a full-fledged martial artist. He served the nation and continued learning increasingly advanced martial arts. After becoming a powerful warrior, Director Kim departed for the Jianghu, leaving Seo behind. Seo simply wished that something special might happen to him too. But in the end, nothing ever did. After 50 years, he is now merely an old man dying from a simple cold. He coughs up blood, repeating that he is from Earth. He did his best to survive. He learned the language, learned to read and write, worked as a laborer to earn a living, bought a small piece of land, and built his own house. He started earning some decent money when he began making soap using lye. In this medieval era, soap was practically a new concept. However, even that came to an end when some thieves stole his soap-making method and began producing their own. These thugs forced him out of the market. Now, he waits for death, having been rejected by this world. A frustrated CEO questions the world. "What do you want from me? Even though I gave it my all, what more must I do?" He begins to cry, wondering why he couldn't have been chosen, even if he wasn't special, and why he keeps losing everything. Now, Seo no longer has the strength to keep his eyes open. As they begin to close, he wishes that if he just had a little more power, maybe, just maybe, he could have had more chances. Lying in bed, sick with a cold, his life comes to an end. That was how he died, and how, bathed in a bright light, he opened his eyes once more. He slowly looked down at his body. It wasn't a hand covered in wrinkles and lines. It was a young hand, full of vitality and life. He was dressed in something clearly unlike the clothes of this world, the blue shirt and sweatpants he had worn back on Earth. He looked around, trying to make sense of the situation. Then he spotted Director Kim, Chief O, Section Chief John, Deputy Manager Kong, Deputy Manager O, and Manager Kim. Seo was stunned to see them. At that moment, he finally understood. He hadn't arrived in this world powerless. He had gained the power of regression. This was Seo's first regression. Director Kim, with half his hair shaved off, glanced around and asked, "What's going on?" "We were just heading to a workshop." He wasn't sure where they were, but Seo knew. This was the very first day. They had just arrived in this strange world. Seo recalled how they got here. They were in an SUV heading to the workshop when a landslide struck, and then something flashed. It was a memory from 50 years ago, so it was a little hazy, and even he couldn't remember it clearly. While he was thinking this, someone suddenly called out from behind, "Hey, Deputy Manager." But he was still lost in thought, wondering, "Now that I've regressed, how should I live?" In regression novels, people usually thrive using their future knowledge, but all I know is how to make soap. Suddenly, the man behind grabbed Seo's shoulder and shouted, "Manager Seo Yoon-hyun." Seo snapped out of his daydream at the shout. He turned around and saw it was Section Chief John. Seo said, trying to explain that he was slightly startled. But suddenly, with a swish, Section Chief John slapped Seo across the face. Everyone present was stunned to witness it. Section Chief John shouted, "Deputy Manager Seo, you bastard! You fell asleep while driving on the mountainside. You nearly got us all killed." Seo stood there, dazed by the slap. He had forgotten about this deputy manager title. It was a title he hadn't heard in so long that he didn't realize Section Chief Jien was talking to him. Section Chief Jien glared at Seo and asked, "Manager Seo, do you want to lose your job the moment we return?" Hearing that, Seo recalled the face he hadn't seen in ages, Section Chief Jien Myong-hun. He was the nephew of John Myong-kail, the executive director of the company Seo worked for. At just 32, he had already secured the section chief position through nepotism. When John Myong-hun was about to lunge at Seo in anger, Chief O stood up and held him back. He told Jan that was enough, since the landslide wasn't something Deputy Manager Seo could have done anything about. But Jan shouted again, asking, "Aren't you upset, Chief O? This crazy jerk was dozing off. That's why we're in this mess." Hearing that, Seo remembered that he really had dozed off while driving. But the reason he was so tired was because John had dumped all his work on Seo the day before the workshop, the tasks John had been avoiding, forcing Seo to stay up all night. Thinking back again, Seo also recalled that originally the person assigned to drive was John. He was the one who was supposed to drive. Pointing at Seo, John shouted, "This stupid bastard. We're stranded because of him." But Seo was gradually beginning to remember his memories from 50 years ago. Back then, Seo was so stunned he couldn't grasp what was going on. So, without thinking, he apologized to John. He even believed it was his own mistake. Then he spent the next 50 years just like that, constantly apologizing to people. Even when a group of bandits stomped over him and stole his belongings, when a damned martial artist insulted him, or when a regional official seized everything he had in the name of taxes, he kept apologizing. But there was one thing Seo came to realize after years of bottling it up. Sure, he had to control his temper in front of those he couldn't face, but not in front of everyone. Seo got up and, with a calm expression, said, "Section Chief John, I know you're upset, but this isn't the time to be blaming others." Hearing that, John became furious and charged at him. He punched Seo again, yelling, "Are you picking a fight?" That punch made Seo realize he didn't have to kneel before someone he could deal with. He turned back and punched John in the face, sending him flying. Watching that, everyone there was completely shocked. They couldn't believe their eyes. Seo kept punching John. In his previous life, Seo had been beaten by martial artists countless times. He was attacked by bandits while collecting herbs in the mountains, by more bandits during years of poor harvest, and even by officials because he couldn't pay his taxes. Now, Seo pinned John down, not giving him a single chance to fight back. Seeing this, everyone stood frozen in place, unsure of what to do. In that violent world, Seo managed to gain something the others didn't. He gained violence. When you strike someone in the eyes, their fear multiplies. And after a beating like that, only 2 words naturally come out of an opponent's mouth: "I'm sorry." Those were the exact words John spoke when Seo struck him in the eyes. Though Seo may not have the mythical talents mentioned by those transcendent individuals or the amazing martial arts that would make him famous in the martial arts world, he now did have the ability to change fate. Director Kim, Chief O, Assistant Manager Kong, Assistant Manager O, and Manager Kim were all staring at Seo with anxious eyes. Among them, Director Kim finally spoke with a shaking voice. "Deputy Manager Seo, no matter what, how could you go that far and assault a fellow colleague?" Seo didn't defend himself and calmly accepted it, saying, "Yes, you're right, Director Kim. I just lost my temper in that moment. I'm sorry for frightening everyone, though I won't be seeing any of you again anyway." He gave a polite bow to Director Kim and the other employees, apologizing for not doing more at the time, since he was the one driving. Director Kim responded by saying that yes, Section Chief Jien had been a bit too harsh, and that Seo couldn't really have done anything about the landslide. Still, Jien had overreacted. He then asked Seo to apologize to Jien personally, knowing that Seo would still be seeing Director Kim. Seo listened to his words because Director Kim would eventually become one of the strongest martial artists there once he began training. If Seo supported him as much as possible in this life, he was certain he'd benefit from it too. That meant he had to get on Director Kim's good side early on. Seo turned to Jin and, while extending a hand, apologized, admitting that his reaction had been excessive. Jin, his face bruised from Seo's beating, looked furious and seemed ready to attack him, but paused when he saw Seo staring back with lifeless eyes and no trace of fear. Once everyone had settled down, Director Kim glanced toward the forest and suggested, "Why don't we try to get out of these woods and search for a village?" Seo agreed as it was the logical step, but he knew this place was different. Immortals roamed freely in pursuit of eternal life, and the only law that ruled here was, the strong devour the weak. The people of this land, the Murin, fought with blades for wealth and honor. The name of this forest was Ascension Path. There were no villages, cities, or nations anywhere nearby. Seo turned to Director Kim and suggested, "Since the sun is about to set, why don't we set up a shelter in a safe spot?" Director Kim agreed that Seo's suggestion made sense but asked, "What about the car? We packed quite a lot of stuff in it for the workshop." There were many things in that car they could use, but only Seo knew they wouldn't be able to locate the car. He also knew they wouldn't trust him, so he decided to just let them search for the car instead of wasting his energy trying to persuade them. He suggested that they should split up. One team could search for shelter, and the other could try to find the car. They would meet back here before it got completely dark. After a few hours, they lit a fire in a cave close to the spot where they had first arrived. While eating, a black-haired girl said she didn't understand. "We were caught in a landslide while inside a car. So how did we end up here when the car is missing?" Director Kim nodded in agreement with the girl, saying he didn't understand it either. Everyone was gathered around the fire, eating. Pointing at the food, a girl remarked, "This tastes like chestnuts." Hearing that, Seo asked her if it was crispy. He told them he had plenty of it so they could eat as much as they liked. Hearing that, Director Kim chuckled and said, "It's quite a serious situation, but thanks to Manager Seo, we're actually enjoying ourselves." He complimented Seo, saying, "I knew you were this reliable even back at the company." While everyone was eating, Seo noticed John sleeping in a corner, refusing to eat anything. Director Kim raised his voice slightly so John could hear, "Manager Seo, if I remember right, you were exhausted while driving because you had to work late last night." The others agreed with Director Kim. A brown-haired girl told him their manager is truly hardworking. A red-haired girl also complimented Seo, saying, "It feels like we are on a camping trip thanks to this cave Manager Seo discovered." Seo knew they were right, since in his previous life they had only discovered this place after wandering in the woods for hours. But he remained humble and told them he had just been lucky. Hearing that, everyone laughed and told Seo he should just accept the compliment. Seo also felt that he should enjoy this moment, as tonight would be the last time they could laugh like this. The next morning, shaking with fear, Seo offered his greetings to the Lord of the Forest. The Lord of the Forest Seo was greeting was a massive seven-tailed fox with glowing red eyes. The fox gazed at Seo and, smiling, said, "You carry quite a distinct scent for a human. Even after living for thousands of years, I've never encountered humans like you." Hearing the noise outside, the black-haired girl woke up. She stepped out and asked Seo what was going on. But the moment she saw the enormous fox, fear took over and she screamed. Hearing her scream, the others also woke up and rushed out of the cave. When they saw the giant fox, they too were terrified and screamed. Hearing them, Seo turned around and shouted, telling everyone to show respect to the Lord of the Forest and kneel down. Upon hearing Seo, the seven-tailed fox said, "Every time I encounter you humans, I'm reminded of how foolish and disrespectful you all are." It told them that normally it would tear off all their limbs, but since one among them seemed to understand how to show proper respect, it would let them go this time. With that said, the fox declared they must pay a price for trespassing in his territory. If one of them offered an arm, he would allow them to remain here. Hearing the fox speak, everyone was already deeply frightened, and after hearing its demand, their fear only grew worse. Seo was also terrified because in his previous life, everyone who saw this creature had screamed in panic and they were all killed after enraging the fox. But this time, Seo felt slightly relieved seeing that the fox acknowledged his respectful behavior and wasn't tearing off all their limbs like before. Then, licking its lips, the seven-tailed fox asked who would offer their arm. Seo reasoned that it was just one person's arm that was all they needed to sacrifice. Besides, a lost arm could be healed by the cultivators who would arrive 2 days later. On top of that, Seo had already prepared an herb that would help reduce the pain. Thinking all that, Seo rolled up his sleeves and reached out his hand toward the seven-tailed fox. While trembling, he told it that he would offer his arm. Everyone was stunned that Seo was willing to sacrifice his hand for them. The seven-tailed fox opened its mouth and swiftly lunged at Seo, saying, "You know your manners, so in return I'll try to make it as painless as possible." Then, in the very next second, with a loud cry of agony, Seo lost one arm. The seven-tailed fox had completely bitten off his hand and devoured it. Everyone turned their eyes away. They couldn't bear to witness the horrifying scene unfold before them. Seo was overwhelmed by the pain. Tears rolled down his cheeks as he reached out with his remaining arm to grab the herb. The pain was so unbearable that he couldn't focus on anything else in that moment. He quickly consumed the herb he had prepared to relieve the pain. After devouring Seo's hand, the seven-tailed fox told him that it had expected him to taste different because of his unusual scent, but in the end, he tasted just like any other human. In fact, it said he tasted even worse due to all the impurities flowing through his veins. Hearing that, Seo slowly began to regain his senses. He was surprised to realize that the herb had actually eased the pain more than he expected. After calming down, Seo apologized to the seven-tailed fox, saying his offering wasn't good enough. But the fox showed no interest in continuing the conversation. It turned away and began to leave, telling them they were allowed to stay in its territory for 7 days, and during that time they wouldn't die thanks to its divine protection. Saying that, it leapt into the sky at incredible speed and vanished. After the seven-tailed fox left, the worried group rushed towards Seo to check on him. Seo slowly got to his feet and asked everyone to head back inside, saying he would explain everything once they were in the cave. Seo calmly explained that he had encountered the fox earlier that morning when he left the cave. The fox had told him that they were now in Murin. Everyone was stunned to hear that they were in Murin. Director Kim asked Seo if he truly meant Murin, as it was hard to believe something so unreal. Seo said it didn't matter and assured them they would be safe for a week since he had sacrificed his arm. Hearing that it was only for a week, Director Kim asked Seo what would happen after that. Breathing heavily, Seo replied that the next week they would have to give up something else. Hearing that, everyone was left in shock. As the herb began to take full effect, Seo started feeling drowsy. He told the others he was feeling sleepy and would rest for a while, hoping they'd understand. With that, he dozed off right there. Then, 15 hours later, at night, Seo woke up alone inside the cave. He could hear his colleagues talking outside. They were all upset with Jian, questioning how he could claim that manager Seo had willingly sacrificed his own arm. Jian snapped back, asking, "Then who's willing to give up their arm or leg every week?" But Chifo responded, saying that manager Seo was extremely valuable, as he was the one who had provided them with both food and shelter. Then John suggested that they should learn as much as possible from Seo within the week, adding that since he had already lost an arm, he likely wouldn't survive much longer anyway. That's why, he said, Seo should be the one to make the sacrifice again. John said all that, not knowing Seo had woken up and was listening from behind. Seo was shocked to hear that now that he had become so weak, John wanted to cut off one of his limbs every week to feed the fox. That was certainly not pleasant. Staring at John, Seo picked up a rock from the ground. He stared at the rock and thought that, with all the violence he had learned from being beaten for 50 years, he could easily kill a modern man like John Hune with just one arm. He glanced at John again, who was still trying to persuade the others to make Seo surrender his other arm too. Furiously, Seo wondered to himself whether he should kill John, but he chose not to act impulsively. Instead, he tossed the rock aside and walked back to the cave. He realized that fear had clearly frozen their minds, and if he behaved too harshly now, it could create problems in his relationship with Director Kim. Suddenly, Chifo yelled at John to keep quiet if he didn't want his ankles broken again. Hearing that, Seo chuckled. He had been right to believe they were good people. It was simply a confusing situation for everyone. The following morning, as the sun rose, everyone assembled in front of the cave. This time, a two-headed snake appeared before them. But unlike the fox that had devoured Seo's arm, the two-headed snake merely asked for a small amount of blood. It was the exact same snake that had drained Chifo's blood, the one who had lost his limbs in his previous life. Hearing that it was only a small amount, A nervous Chief O stepped forward and offered his arm this time. But after drinking Chief O's blood, the snake gagged and vomited, saying, "This is disgusting. This is the worst human blood I've ever tasted." Hearing that, Chief became furious, but Co understood it was the blood of a 21st century worker, soaked in nicotine and cholesterol. No wonder it tasted awful. Co then turned around and asked John Mong-hoon to join him in gathering some herbs. Hearing that, John was stunned and asked Co if he had really used his full name, but Co didn't respond. Instead, he asked John if he was hungry. John replied that he was. Co walked up to John and said, "I'll teach you about the fruits and edible herbs, so come with me." Co leaned in and whispered to John that he intended to offer his arm to the fox again next week. And if he didn't survive, someone had to know how to live in this forest. Hearing that, John became extremely frightened, realizing that Co had overheard everything the previous night. He had no option but to thank Co and agreed to go along with him. Hearing his gratitude, Co quietly laughed to himself because only he knew the fox wasn't returning, and Jian would never get the chance to use this knowledge. As the two of them reached a place filled with fruit trees, Co shouted, "Jong Hun, how many times do I have to tell you that's the wrong fruit concentrate?" Co apologized while picking a red fruit. Watching this, Co warned him that eating that fruit could get him killed. This went on for hours as Co kept giving instructions to John, and Jian had no choice but to follow them. Eventually, Jian began to feel drained and asked Co to wait a moment, saying he needed a break. He had been digging endlessly to collect these herbs. Seeing his condition, Co quietly laughed to himself because this was exactly how Jian had punished him when he first joined the company. Co told Jian they had to finish before nightfall, so they needed to move quickly. Time passed gradually, and both kept working on their tasks. Then suddenly, John unearthed a huge ginseng. John was stunned to see it. Holding it in his hand, he said, "This thing is massive." He asked Co if it was real ginseng. Co replied that it was something like that. Co knew that while it looked like ginseng, to be accurate, it was actually a yellow bamboo root. It could be due to the ascension path being so filled with energy, but here, yellow bamboo roots, usually no bigger than a pinky finger, had grown to this enormous size. Co knew it wouldn't be very useful for cultivators, but it was an incredibly valuable medicine for martial artists known to boost ki, and it would likely benefit Director Kim. While they were talking, they discovered two more right nearby. Amazed, John asked Co if it was alright to dig up so much wild ginseng. Co naturally said yes and told him to take off his shirt and use it to carry them. Co then glanced at the setting sun and noticed a crack in space. Seeing it, he realized that the cultivators would be arriving soon. He said to John, "Let's head back." As they made their way to the cave, the crack Co had noticed earlier suddenly erupted with a massive blast, releasing an enormous surge of spiritual energy into the sky. At the moment of the explosion, Jian collapsed to the ground, screaming and holding his head. He wasn't the only one. Chief O was in the same state, along with Manager Kong. All three clutched their heads, crying out in agony. Seeing this, Director Kim started to panic, asking what was happening to them. Just then, three cultivators appeared, soaring through the sky. Looking at John, Chief O, and Manager Kong, a cultivator named Buko, dressed in golden robes, said, "What a surprise, who would have thought we'd find such raw talent here?" A black-cloaked cultivator named Huwok told Buko to back off, claiming they were his. Hearing this, the third cultivator, dressed in blue, called Huwok shameless. Watching these cultivators, Director Kim became frightened and asked who they were. The cultivators noticed there were 7 individuals, but only 3 of them had spiritual roots. The others were simply ordinary mortals. Then Buko lifted his hand and formed a ball of lightning. He hurled it at John, who screamed in agony as thousands of lightning bolts surged through his body. When Buko finally stopped, he was astonished by how remarkable John's body was. It was the body of heavenly golden thunder. Then Huwok stepped forward, telling Buko to step aside as it was his turn. He was holding a musical instrument, and as he began to play, Manager Kong, who had her ears covered, suddenly started screaming in pain. But it wasn't an ordinary scream. It was so loud that it echoed throughout the entire forest. Seeing this, Huwok became overly excited, realizing that Manager Kong possessed the ghostly and transforming immortal root. He had never imagined that something like this truly existed. Then it became the third cultivator's turn. He landed on the ground and, placing a hand on Chief's shoulder, infused him with spiritual energy. He examined Chief's body and discovered that it was a unique holy body. Chief was completely stunned and asked the cultivator what was happening. The cultivator smiled and announced that he would take all three of them as disciples of the Azure Heaven Creation sect, since each of them had the potential to change the entire world. In a deep voice, he asked Chief, "How does that sound?" Chief O was terrified in the cultivator's presence. He could barely breathe. He was overwhelmed, wondering what this power was, and felt like refusing might cost him his life. Suddenly, Huok descended and urged Chief O to join the Black Ghost Valley instead, saying they possessed every cultivation method: immortality, the power to defy the heavens, fame, and fortune. He vowed that they would receive all of it within 100 years. Moments later, Buko also came down and questioned Huok, asking what he was talking about, claiming that the Golden Divine Heavenly Thunder sect was the one most suited for them. While they were arguing, Director Kim stepped in and asked the cultivators if they could help them escape the forest, as at this rate they would all end up dying there. But the cultivators paid him no attention. Buko pulled out a bottle, opened its cap and said, "Mortals worry too much. How did you make it to the ascension path with such a useless body?" Saying this, he aimed the mouth of the bottle at John, and it instantly pulled John inside. John could do nothing but scream for help. Then the blue-robed cultivator took Chief O and glanced at Seo. He smiled and said, "Looks like one of them lost an arm to that fox." Noticing the wound, he decided to help personally. He channeled his spiritual power to heal Seo's hand, telling him that although he was just a mortal, he had courage. Seo's entire hand regenerated, and he expressed his thanks to the cultivator. He also took Manager Kong along with him. Then all three cultivators soared back into the sky, and before leaving, they told Seo that they had captured all the beasts and monsters along the ascension path on their way here, so the area would remain safe for the next 10 years. Watching them leave, Director Kim ran after them, asking them to wait and to tell them which direction to go, since they had no idea how to get out. He shouted for Section Chief John, Chief O, and Deputy Manager Kong, but it was pointless. The cultivators ascended into the sky and vanished. Watching them disappear, Seo felt deeply disappointed, but it was pointless. The same thing had happened 50 years ago. No matter how loudly they shouted, those cultivators treated them like insects and simply moved on. Still, Seo felt a small sense of relief, knowing they had at least healed his arm. While running after them, Director Kim became out of breath and collapsed to the ground, asking, "What do you expect us to do in a forest like this?" But just before he completely gave up hope, Director Kim suddenly noticed several beams of light soaring in the same direction the cultivators had gone. Seeing that, he grew confused and asked, "What are all those lights in the sky? Is something over in that direction?" But Director Kim couldn't abandon his team, so he turned back. The following day, heavy rain poured down with lightning flashing all around. All four, Deputy Manager O, Manager Kim, Manager CIO, and Director Kim, were taking shelter in the same cave. But Deputy Manager O's condition was worsening. She lay on the ground, coughing up blood. Manager Kim asked CIO if there was any kind of herb they could use, as Deputy Manager O's condition was critical. She was panicking, unsure of what to do. Aware of what the future held, CIO told Manager Kim, "Let's wait a bit longer. Someone might show up and heal her." Hearing that, Manager Kim looked confused. Suddenly, they heard the sound of footsteps. Someone stepped into the cave and said, "Mortals on the ascension path are like ants, struggling in the battles between dragons." Seeing the man, Director Kim quickly stepped forward and asked, "Who are you?" The man smiled and replied, "I am the Sea Dragon King." The Sea Dragon King Sio informed them that Deputy Manager O was manipulating the storm outside. Upon hearing that, everyone stood in shock. The Sea Dragon King clarified that the storm had abruptly appeared from nowhere, so he arrived to investigate its origin. Pointing toward Deputy Manager O, he said that the woman lying there must have performed the sorcery behind the storm. The Sea Dragon King was astonished because she seemed like an ordinary woman, lacking even a hint of cultivation. So how could she possess such immense power? Moreover, she wasn't even doing it intentionally, which made it even stranger. Hearing that, Seo explained to the Sea Dragon King that in truth, they were the ones confused. They had only arrived in this place recently, yet one after another, formidable beings like him appeared and took away their companions. Upon hearing this, the Sea Dragon King burst into laughter. He asked Seo if he was claiming that among his teammates there were a few with exceptional potential, and then, as though it had been pre-arranged, powerful cultivators arrived and took them, and now he too had appeared right in front of this woman. Seo told the Sea Dragon King that's exactly what had occurred. Gazing at Seo, the Sea Dragon King grinned and asked, "Dear mortal, do you have any idea where we are?" He informed Seo that this location was called the Ascension Path, or simply the Path to Ascension. It served as a vital gateway that leads directly to the upper realm. Within just a few months, a dimensional rupture named the Ascension Gate would open right around this very area. It occurs once every 1,000 years. Innumerable high-ranking cultivators and spiritual entities would have already started assembling near the Path to Ascension to reach the upper realm. So, isn't it perfectly reasonable that cultivators like him would show up near them? Upon hearing that, they finally grasped the full picture. Then Director Kim told the Sea Dragon King that those cultivators mentioned they were taking his companions to join their sect. And if those cultivators were indeed ascending to the upper realm, how could his colleagues possibly accompany them? Listening to that, the Sea Dragon King explained that it might be difficult for ordinary mortals like them to comprehend. He pulled out a bottle similar to the ones the cultivators carried and explained that there was a technique among cultivators used to compress large objects and store them inside enchanted tools like this. Those cultivators had likely stored their sect within such items. Their intention was to ascend to the upper realm together with their entire sect once the Ascension Gate opened. The Sea Dragon King informed them that, in fact, he too had sealed one of the undersea castles belonging to his Sea Dragon clan inside this very item. Within it, 1,800 sea dragons lay dormant. Upon hearing that, Seo and Director Kim's jaws dropped in utter shock. The Sea Dragon King gently patted Deputy Manager O's head, saying she was unusual and fascinating. If she were to become part of the Sea Dragon clan, she could turn into someone truly remarkable. Watching him pat the unconscious Deputy Manager O's head, Director Kim lunged forward to stop the Sea Dragon King. But in the very next moment, he dropped to his knees as an immense force pinned him to the ground. Whenever Director Kim attempted to resist that force, it only intensified, applying even more crushing pressure on him. The one exerting that pressure was the Sea Dragon King. He raised Deputy Manager O in his hand and told Director Kim that he would offer her his blood and acknowledge her as his kin, and that would be best for everyone. That he then offered one more piece of advice. Looking at Director Kim with his glowing green eyes, he warned him never to casually question high-level cultivators. Right after he said that, the pressure on both Director Kim and Seo intensified and both of their eyeballs popped out. Cradling Deputy Manager O in his arms, the Sea Dragon King walked away, telling them he had only answered because of his generosity. Otherwise, most cultivators would have slain them for simply asking a question. With that, he exited the cave and stepped into the raging thunderstorm, transformed into his true dragon form, and soared back into the sky. His dragon form was so massive and powerful that it seemed to stretch up into the heavens. By the next morning, the thunderstorm abruptly ended and the skies cleared. Manager Kim was still in complete shock over the fact that all her co-workers had been taken away. She couldn't comprehend what was happening. First an avalanche from nowhere, then immortals and dragons taking away their companions. It was too much for her to process and she began losing her mind. Seeing her in that state, Seo moved toward her, trying to comfort her. But while trembling, Manager Kim said, "Manager Seo, please, you must not be taken too. If you're taken, I won't be able to survive alone in this forest." Saying that, she burst into tears. Seeing her in that state, Seo wished to reassure her that he wouldn't leave, but deep down, he knew that, sadly, their time was almost up. Just then, Manager Kim felt something inside her head and let out a scream. She collapsed, clutching her head, and told Seo that something was approaching. Watching her scream, Director Kim rushed over and asked, "What's going on with her now?" Suddenly, the entire jungle descended into chaos. Birds in the sky and animals throughout the forest began fleeing for their lives. Manager Kim began trembling and told them that it was Head. Hearing that, Director Kim grew confused, and before he could process anything, an old man riding a mechanical lion suddenly appeared. That old man was startled to see mortals there and questioned how mere mortals had entered the path to ascension. But after observing them briefly, it didn't take the old man long to figure it out. With the ascension gate about to open, the surrounding space had turned unstable, and they must have been swept into a spatial storm. He laughed aloud, praising himself as a genius for instantly grasping the situation. He then stepped down from his mechanical lion and asked them who had just released that immense consciousness. He chuckled, saying it was such a potent presence that he had assumed a sage from the upper realm had arrived. Glancing at Deputy Manager O's state, he inquired if it was her. Director Kim stepped forward and blocked the old man, saying, "Manager Kim is our companion." But with a mere flick of his finger, the old man hurled Director Kim to the side. Witnessing that, CO instantly leapt forward to catch Director Kim in an attempt to shield him. He managed to catch him, but was also thrown back, crashing hard onto the ground. Director Kim remained unhurt and expressed his gratitude to Deputy Manager CO, but CO didn't respond. Seeing that, Director Kim grew alarmed and helped CO to his feet. To their surprise, CO's entire back was exposed and injured from the impact with the ground. Director Kim was stunned to see that and asked CO if he was all right. CO, in a slow and weak voice, told Director Kim that he was fine. Meanwhile, the old man approached Deputy Manager O and gently held her by the chin, asking, "Let me take you in. You don't possess any spiritual root, but I can awaken it within you using my power." The old man pondered what might occur if such a peculiar consciousness developed into a cultivator's divine consciousness. Hearing that, Deputy Manager O began crying and looked towards CO and Director Kim for help. When he saw her turning to them, the old man looked at CO and Director Kim and questioned whether she was still clinging to her worldly attachments even after his offer to take her in. This enraged the old man. Channeling his power, he seized both CO and Director Kim by the neck and lifted them into the air. Both of them began gasping for breath. The old man told Deputy Manager O that he would personally sever all her worldly bonds. Watching them struggle like that, Deputy Manager O became terrified. She started weeping, pleading with the old man to stop. She told him she would do whatever he wanted if only he would spare them. Hearing her, the old man told Deputy Manager O that she must let go of all her worldly attachments. While sobbing, Deputy Manager O told him that she understood. After hearing that, the old man decided to spare CO and Director Kim, and both of them collapsed to the ground. However, the old man realized that if he let them remain there, she would stay emotionally bound to them. So he resolved to send them to a nearby mortal nation. As he said this, he activated his spiritual powers and opened a portal. The old man informed Deputy Manager O that both of her colleagues would be scattered randomly through a dimensional rift, and even he couldn't predict where they would land. No sooner had he said that than a large portal opened and began pulling CO and Director Kim inside. Director Kim was sucked into the portal almost instantly without even grasping what was happening. CO, before being pulled in, used all his remaining strength to grab the herbs he had gathered the day before. Then both of them vanished into the portal. At the portal's edge, Deputy Manager O stood crying for them. As the portal closed, everything turned pitch black. Suddenly, the noise of a bustling crowd filled their ears. A street vendor's voice rang out saying, "We have the finest silks in Yango. Fresh scriptures from Shanji have just arrived." Both CO and Director Kim lay unconscious on the ground. CO was the first one to regain consciousness. As he rose to his feet, he looked ahead and noticed that he was in an alleyway with many people walking along the street nearby. CO didn't recognize the place and began wondering where he had ended up. The reason it felt unfamiliar was that, in his previous life, he had never landed in a place like this. He got up slowly, realizing that the immortal had spoken the truth. The location where they fell was completely random. As CO exited the alleyway, he felt that the path ahead looked oddly familiar. Looking around carefully, he finally understood this was the place where he had once spent 50 years of his life. Right in front of him stood a massive 10-story building. Upon seeing that structure, he finally realized that he was in the capital of Yango, Seeing City. After witnessing the scene outside, CO went back to Director Kim and woke him up. Director Kim was extremely exhausted and told Manager CO that he couldn't keep up with everything going on anymore. Sitting beside CO, he told Director Kim he felt the same way. It would be nice if this were all simply a dream. Director Kim couldn't believe that it was just the two of them remaining. but he thought he should feel relieved that they hadn't been taken by those monsters. Seo simply looked at the confused Director Kim and didn't say a thing, because even he wasn't sure about this. He may have regressed, but in his former life, he had been nothing more than a powerless herb gatherer. Seo then told Director Kim that they couldn't remain in this alleyway forever. So why didn't they head out from here? Director Kim said, "All right," and both of them walked out of the alleyway. But as they stepped out, all the people of that place began staring at them while speaking in some unfamiliar language. Hearing those voices, Director Kim became very confused. He asked Seo, "What are they saying? Sounds like Chinese. Why is everyone whispering while looking at us?" Seo told Director Kim that some of the people were saying the clothes they were both wearing seemed funny. Hearing that, Director Kim was stunned. Seo smiled and assured him not to worry because he understood a bit of Chinese. Director Kim wanted to ask something, but noticing Seo's wounded back, he stayed quiet and said, "That's great." Seo said that, but in truth he had lied to Director Kim. The language those people were using was not Chinese. Other than the fact that they shared the same characters, it sounded completely unfamiliar. In his previous life, Seo had endured the mockery of beggars for 2 months just to grasp the basics of the language. But now there was no reason for that. Seo pulled out the herbs he had gathered earlier and asked Director Kim if they should get some fresh clothes. Hearing that, Director Kim was puzzled and asked how, since he felt the people in this place wouldn't accept their currency. Seo didn't explain anything to Director Kim and simply led him to the city's medicine hall. The medicine hall's owner was astonished to see the ginseng and asked Seo if he was truly letting them purchase such valuable herbs. Seo acted confident and told the owner that those yellow bamboo roots were at least 800 years old. The owner said, "Of course," and added that the roots should be valued at around 15 silver ingots. Hearing 15 silver ingots, even Seo became uneasy, as he had never possessed that much money in his past life. But he kept his composure and urged the shopkeeper to hurry and take the money. The shopkeeper agreed and instantly handed over the silver to Seo. After leaving, Seo and Director Kim first bought some clothes and then purchased a house in the city. Director Kim was surprised to see the house they would be living in. Seo said yes and told Director Kim that starting today, he would teach him the language of this world. Hearing that, Director Kim became very happy and thanked Manager Seo. Seo made it appear as if everything was fine. But after bribing a few people for identity plaques and purchasing the land and home, they were left with only 1 silver ingot. He assumed it was because they were in the capital and that's why everything cost so much. While Seo was examining the money, Director Kim noticed Seo's back. Even though he was wearing fresh clothes, due to the injuries on his back, his new outfit had turned red. Realizing how much Seo had done for him, Director Kim suggested to Seo that since they were now in a completely new place, why didn't he just call him by his name? Surprised to hear that, Seo told Director Kim that he was okay with that. Director Kim smiled and thanked him while addressing him by his full name, Seo Yoon-hyun. Later that night, after settling inside the house, Seo explained to Director Kim that the reason he had been able to get all that silver was because he had sold those herbs. Pointing toward the 2 remaining ginseng roots lying in front of him, Seo told Director Kim that they wouldn't have any steady income once the herbs ran out, so they needed to come up with a way to generate money. Hearing that, Director Kim glanced at the ginseng and pondered. Then suddenly, he came up with an idea and suggested to Seo that they use the silver they'd get from selling the remaining herbs to start a business. It was a solid plan. Seo understood that with the money they could earn from this, along with Director Kim's experience from being a director in a mid-sized company, they should be able to sustain a living. But that didn't seem enough. Seo figured that since he had regressed, why not aim higher? He knew Director Kim was a martial arts prodigy, who, after reading some third-rate martial arts manuals sold on the streets, became a martial master in just a few months. Once he picked up more advanced techniques, he became one of the most formidable martial artists in the Yongho. But what if he were to study high-level martial arts right from the beginning? Seo might be able to accelerate the rise of the greatest swordsman in the Yongho by at least 30 years. Thinking of all that, Seo smiled and made up his mind. He would benefit as much as possible while working for him. He informed Director Kim that this was Murin, a realm of martial arts. This immediately caught Director Kim's attention. Seo told Director Kim that no one could predict when the gangs of the Jungho might target them if they launched a business, so shouldn't they at least learn basic self-defense? Director Kim's face lit up upon hearing the words martial arts, but he also knew they didn't teach outsiders their martial arts. So he asked Seo how they would manage to learn. Seeing his enthusiasm, Seo smiled, because as a well-known Murin novel nerd, he already knew Director Kim would be curious. He explained to Director Kim that in this city, there are 7 renowned sections. Among them, the demon-slaying sect, self-binding temple, suppressing birdhouse, and the 7 mysteries sect belong to the orthodox side of the Jungho. Meanwhile, the Wolf Fang Gang, the Dark Knight Association, and the Dragon Fighting Stronghold are seen as unorthodox. The people refer to them as the 4 stars and the 3 demons. The demon-slaying sect primarily trains in sword and blade techniques. The self-binding temple is a Buddhist sect, while the suppressing birdhouse resembles the house sect. They focus on intelligence gathering. The 7 mysteries sect has an ancient legacy and teaches a variety of martial arts. On the other hand, not much is widely known about the 3 demons. It's said they specialize in stealth skills and sorcery, and are involved in many unlawful activities. After finishing his explanation, Seo asked Director Kim which sect appealed to him most. Without a moment's hesitation, Director Kim picked the demon-slaying sect, adding that a martial artist should wield a sword, and a man ought to master blade techniques. Hearing that decision, Seo thought it was only fitting for the man once hailed as the greatest swordsman in his previous life. But Director Kim was puzzled and asked Seo how he knew all of this. Seo chuckled and told Director Kim that he had overheard some martial artists talking earlier. Then, 3 months later, Seo and Director Kim headed to the demon-slaying sect. But the guards blocked them, asking what their purpose was. Seo introduced Director Kim as his elder brother and told the guards that they had heard about the fame of the demon-slaying sect and had come hoping to learn martial arts. The guard of the demon-slaying sect was a strict, muscular man. He glanced at Seo and Director Kim's clothing and assumed they appeared to have a reasonable amount of money. But he told Director Kim that training in martial arts at his age would be challenging. Seo laughed and handed over a silver coin to the guard, asking if he could at least allow them to speak with someone of higher authority, adding that even basic self-defense training would suffice. Like that, by bribing the guard, Seo and Director Kim managed to enter the demon-slaying sect. Inside, they met one of the sect's elders. The elder asked if they were interested in learning martial arts merely for self-defense. Seo responded that they wished to learn the best techniques available, offering a box filled with silver nuggets. Upon seeing all those silver nuggets, the elder accepted, saying he supposed they could be allowed to join as external disciples. But after taking the silver, he added that no special treatment was given to those who entered through donations, and furthermore, they would only accept one of them. Hearing that, Seo was stunned because all that silver was worth just 1 yellow bamboo root, and that was all they were willing to offer. Surprised, Director Kim tried to question the elder if they were being scammed, but before he could say anything further, Seo accepted the elder's terms and thanked him, adding that his brother would be the one receiving the training. Upon hearing that, Director Kim was truly shocked. Then, as they were leaving, the elder asked Director Kim to come out later to the area where all the external disciples gathered. As they walked away, Director Kim asked Seo what was the point if only he would be learning martial arts. He said he might have picked a different faction had he known they'd be that costly. Seo turned back with a grin and told Director Kim not to worry about it, saying it's not like he had ever excelled at sports anyway. He told Director Kim he'd just start a business with the leftover money and support him, so he should simply focus on mastering martial arts. Director Kim was taken aback by that. He couldn't believe how much Seo was giving up for his sake. He told Seo that he would do his best, but Director Kim still had doubts because of his age and wasn't sure if he could truly accomplish much. Seo encouraged him to believe in himself that he was capable. Director Kim thanked Seo and went to train with the outer disciples. Then, 7 months later, during a competition held inside the sect, all the elders of the demon-slaying sect were both shocked and furious at the sight before them. In just 7 months, Director Kim had defeated every one of their disciples. The elders were enraged, demanding to know how some outsider from nowhere had managed to overcome all their prized disciples in such a short time. The demon-slaying sect was thrown into chaos. To master a martial art means to grasp the true essence that the martial art carries and to physically align oneself with it. A third-rate fighter who understands the essence of a martial art can rise to second-rate if they absorb it into their personal comprehension. To move beyond that, one requires more than double the depth of understanding as before, alongside equal time and effort. Yet sometimes, individuals blessed with talent seem to mock normal levels of understanding and leap through multiple stages at once. The demon-slaying sect is filled with such gifted warriors, the renowned sect of Seo City. But an outsider has arrived to challenge the prime disciples of that noble sect. In just 7 months, Director Kim became a top-tier warrior who had fully mastered the absolute dragon saber technique of the demon-slaying sect. The Grand Elder was enraged upon witnessing Director Kim, for he knew it was unthinkable to reach first-rate with just 6 months of training. First-rate level is a rank achievable only through the combined dedication of many elite martial artists. Furthermore, Director Kim was an outsider learning within their sect. To many, it felt like their traditions had bowed to a single man. The Grand Elder instantly commanded the sect guards to seize Director Kim. And so, he was captured and confined in a house watched by hundreds of guards. But now, even Seo was taken. He understood that since an outsider had acquired skills worthy of a sect elder within 7 months, the entire sect was thrown into chaos. In such an absurd scenario, Director Kim was locked in his quarters, suspected of being a spy from a rival sect. Still, Seo couldn't grasp why he too was seen as suspicious, especially when he didn't even practice martial arts. Seo questioned Director Kim, who was refining his sword moves, if he felt concerned. Director Kim chuckled and asked Seo what exactly he should be afraid of. Seo brought up the fact that they were labeling him as a spy. In martial arts stories, they often destroy a person's core or even sever their internal flow. Director Kim agreed that it was true, but added that somehow, he felt like he was nearing another wall, and if he overcame it, he was confident he'd rise to the next level. Seo was stunned upon hearing this and asked what kind of monster Director Kim truly was. It hadn't even been long since he had reached the first-rate level, and now he was already close to advancing again. Seo understood that the martial peak came after reaching first-rate. It was the stage where most great sect leaders or high elders resided. In Yenghua, they were referred to as absolute masters, and only about 1,000 of them existed across the entire nation. The martial world never speaks of any level beyond that. So, martial peak is regarded as the ultimate realm achievable through martial arts alone. Seo realized his assumptions were off. At this speed, the world's strongest swordsman would appear 40 years earlier, not just 30. 7 days passed, and Seo along with Director Kim were still being held captive. But even during that time, Director Kim wasn't idle. He kept training and meditating without rest. After 7 days, all the chi he accumulated transformed into 3 blooming energy lotus flowers. Director Kim inhaled their essence directly through his mouth. Seo was stunned to witness the lotuses, for he recognized them as chi flowers that manifested only to masters at the martial peak, and 3 of them had gathered at once. After fully drawing in that chi energy, Director Kim stood and told Seo that he had broken through the barrier, and he no longer feared the leader of the demon-slaying sect. Hearing those words, Seo let out a laugh and admitted that Director Kim's talent far surpassed anything he had imagined. Director Kim smiled and told Seo that even he was amazed by himself. He had never imagined he possessed such talent. He wondered if this was the reason he had always enjoyed martial arts stories as a kid. Just then, an elder from the demon-slaying sect entered with several guards and declared, "Here arrives Jim Yong-hun along with his ally." The elder unfolded a scroll and announced they had orders from the sect leader to destroy the chi core of the so-called spy who had stolen their sect's martial arts. Hearing this, Director Kim glared at the elder in fury, while Seo panicked and tried to speak up. "We're not spies. We were only—" But before Seo could finish, the elder struck him in the face and shouted at him to stay quiet, claiming they'd heard them speaking in a coded language. He commanded the guards to hold them down. But before they could move, Director Kim drew his sword and, in a flash, sliced off the elder's hand. The elder was stunned by the sudden move and lost grip of his own weapon. Director Kim aimed his sword at the elder and declared that this was the first sect he had ever joined, and he was no spy. However, a guard from behind didn't listen and lunged to strike Director Kim. Before his blade could reach, Director Kim dashed with blinding speed and severed the hands of every guard in the chamber. Watching that unfold, all the guards turned and began fleeing. Understanding that he was a martial artist at the peak level, they rushed off to notify the sect leader at once. Seeing them flee, Director Kim turned to Seo and said he planned to visit other sects for training, then asked what Seo intended to do. Seo instantly responded that he would go with Director Kim and proposed they head to the famed unorthodox sect, the Dragon Fighting Stronghold. Upon hearing this, Director Kim chuckled and told Seo to go on ahead, assuring him they would meet there, but not before he dealt with the pursuit of the sect leader and elders. A few hours later, high up in the Dragon Fighting Stronghold's rugged mountain terrain, Director Kim stood atop a cliff with his sword and asked Seo why he was so late. Seo, panting hard after the long climb, laughed and said it was simply because Director Kim was too fast. While conversing with Director Kim, Seo's gaze was fixed on the blood-soaked sword in Kim's hand. Looking at it, Seo recalled how Director Kim used to scold him for being violent not too long ago. But even if it was for survival, this world had turned them into something different. Seo silently wished they could return, not to this brutal martial realm, but back to an ordinary life on Earth. If given the chance to regress, Seo only wanted to return to Earth. With all those thoughts, Seo continued climbing the mountain, following behind Director Kim. He understood there was no turning back now. Since they were here, they had to do what was necessary. After the betrayal from the demon-slaying sect, Director Kim seized control of the Dragon Fighting Stronghold. 2 years later, he traveled across all regions of Yenghua, defeating sect after sect. By the 3rd year, he had successfully shattered the emblems of every last sect. He became renowned as the greatest martial artist beneath the heavens and used his legendary status to unify the sects under the martial alliance. 7 years passed, and by then, Director Kim and Seo shared a bond as close as brothers, ignoring the difference in age. Director Kim developed a martial art uniquely tailored for Seo and handed him the manual, saying, "This is the Severing Mountain Sword." Seo accepted the book and began reading it intently. Director Kim explained that he gave it that name with the hope Seo would carry on its will, a will powerful enough to slice through mountains. He believed that if Seo mastered the Severing Mountain Sword, he could eventually reach martial peak. As Seo read the manual, he was taken aback. Aside from what Director Kim had already told him, the Dragon Vein Chi method crafted alongside it was true first-rate martial arts. Unlike any second- or third-rate techniques, it was an immensely powerful method, and Seo immediately began training in it. But there was one major issue. Even after trying, Seo failed to learn it and would collapse instantly during practice sessions with Director Kim. Witnessing that, Director Kim told Seo bluntly that he truly lacked talent. Indeed, Seo's potential was incredibly poor. Despite receiving personal guidance and a martial art custom-made by the greatest martial artist alive, Seo barely reached the third-rate level, and that too after a full year of effort. A year later, Seo admitted that it couldn't be helped. He told Director Kim that perhaps he had some talent in medicine. After all, everyone has strengths in different areas. Then one day, a full decade later, Seo witnessed something truly astonishing. He saw Director Kim meditating, with 5 radiant chi flower orbs forming above his head. Seo was in awe, for this was a realm he had only read about in ancient tales, the convergence of 5 energies to the origin. All at once, Director Kim's entire body began to emit powerful internal chi. His joints and bones cracked loudly, and the surrounding energy shifted drastically as his white hair of age reverted to jet black. It was a divine spectacle. Director Kim's body undergoing complete transformation, radiating such energy that even standing nearby became unbearable. Once everything settled, Seo looked forward and was stunned by what he saw. Director Kim, now reborn as a young man, chuckled and asked Seo what had left him so astonished. His voice, his features, and his physique had completely changed into that of a young man. "This is known as skeletal restructuring," he said. Stunned, Seo called Director Kim brother, joking that he now looked even younger than him. Director Kim laughed and asked if he truly appeared that way. He said he felt overflowing with vitality, as though nothing was beyond his reach. Seo remarked that the world would be stunned once they saw his complete transformation. While putting on his robe, Director Kim replied, "Certainly." He walked up to Seo and said it was about time to pass down the leadership of the Murin Alliance. But Seo knew that there wasn't anyone who had gained Director Kim's recognition. Director Kim agreed and said the Murin Alliance leader, by its nature, needed to possess a strong martial foundation, but not one individual truly grasped the essence of martial arts. Seo chuckled and told Kim that was because he wasn't normal. Where else would you find a genius like him? Director Kim glanced out the window at the disciples' training and said that regardless, someone had to be found. Seo insisted once more that there simply weren't any worthy candidates. Then, 25 years later, inside a building at the heart of the Murin Alliance, Seo was calmly writing with a brush. 35 years had gone by since he had begun his second life in Dongsung. His hair had turned silver gray, as he was now well into his mid-60s. These days, he often wondered where the youthful Director Kim was and what he might be doing now. A year after undergoing his transformation, Director Kim had passed down the role of Murin Alliance leader to the next generation and stepped away. Seo had wanted to retire with him at that time, but to stabilize the disorderly Murin Alliance, he remained as its chief strategist for many more years. Director Kim had told Seo that he wished to roam the martial world and explore the entire Yen Kingdom. Maybe because of that, he didn't even show up at Seo's retirement ceremony. Old Seo stepped out of his room for a breath of fresh air. Looking around his home, he felt a deep sense of loneliness. He had purchased the house with enthusiasm using his retirement funds, but now it felt too large for one man to live in. That was the real issue. While pondering those thoughts, he suddenly heard rustling sounds from the bushes. Becoming cautious, he moved closer to investigate, only to be shocked at the sight of Director Kim standing there, wearing tattered clothes. Seo asked Director Kim what was with his ragged appearance and why he hadn't even attended the retirement ceremony. "Where have you been all this time?" Director Kim laughed faintly and collapsed to the ground. Seeing his condition, Seo quickly asked if something had gone wrong. Looking up at the sky, Director Kim told Seo that he had truly believed he was blessed with martial prowess. Sitting beside him, Director Kim asked, "Isn't that right? If I'm not a genius, then what else could I be?" He continued, "I am without a doubt a martial arts prodigy. Perhaps in this entire Yen Kingdom, or among folks like me, no one rivals my martial talent." Hearing Director Kim refer to himself as an ordinary person, Seo was confused and asked how he could possibly be ordinary. "Who under heaven doesn't know you're the number one in the world?" But before Seo could finish speaking, Director Kim interrupted with a heavy voice and said he had battled those cultivators. Did Seo remember them? Those monsters from 35 years ago who had kidnapped their comrades and soared through the skies? Seo, who had lived through that era twice, instantly remembered and was stunned to realize they were cultivators. He knew such beings rarely revealed themselves openly, instead operating from the shadows, embedded deep within the Yen imperial family and influencing the kingdom itself. After the Murin Alliance was founded and began gaining influence within the Yen kingdom, those cultivator factions started interfering seriously. Director Kim was displeased by this, but to oppose them meant going against the kingdom itself. To shield the Murin Alliance, they had no option but to comply. For that reason, Director Kim relinquished his leadership role in the Murin Alliance. As a mere mortal, he traveled across the Yen kingdom, seeking them out alone to stand against them. Director Kim explained to Seo that finding cultivators was extremely difficult. Even when he did find one and tried to confront them, they dismissed him outright, saying he wasn't worth their time. Then they would vanish using illusion techniques or flying skills, leaving no chance to counter. But 5 years earlier, he finally managed to fight a cultivator. Upon hearing this, Seo's eyes lit up, and he eagerly asked if he had won the battle. Director Kim replied calmly that yes, he had. Upon hearing that, Seo chuckled and told Director Kim that if he had done such a thing during his time as Murin Alliance leader, he would have dragged him by the collar. But while shaking hands, Director Kim said he had fought desperately against a cultivator who had reached the chi condensation realm, and he barely managed to graze his fingertip. Seo was left stunned. Director Kim then told him the cultivator had said, "If you can even touch my body, I'll count that as your win." So technically, he did win. But Director Kim still felt disappointed. Seo then asked if that cultivator from the chi condensation realm was one of the 10 great masters from the cultivation world or someone of similar standing. Director Kim shook his head and explained that the cultivator had said his level was just the second lowest in the cultivation hierarchy. In martial terms, he was merely second-rate. Seo stood there in disbelief. He couldn't wrap his head around what he was hearing and asked what kind of nonsense this was. In both his current and past lives, Seo had known cultivators to be terrifyingly powerful. But Yonghun's martial arts clearly defied limits. He was someone who could walk on air using skywalking, and slice through ancient steel and buildings like they were soft tofu. Yet, a genius like him could only manage to scratch the fingertip of someone near the bottom of the cultivation ladder? With visible disappointment, Director Kim said, "I was like a frog trapped in a well. We can never stand up to cultivators. They're like unstoppable natural disasters." Hearing this, Seo began sweating. Director Kim's words truly frightened him. But then, Director Kim pulled a hand out of his pocket and told Seo that today he had managed to cut the wrist of that cultivator. Hearing this, Seo brightened up and asked whether that meant his martial skills had surpassed the cultivator's. But Director Kim shook his head and told Seo that the cultivator had simply used a talisman, and his hand regenerated. With that, Director Kim stood up and told Seo that perhaps his martial journey had come to an end. Stunned, Seo quickly asked what he meant by that. Director Kim told Seo that he had come to bid farewell. With a chuckle, he said, "That person said he admired my determination and would accept me into his cultivation sect. I'll probably begin as the youngest disciple." Hearing that, Seo asked if becoming a cultivator meant gaining immortality. And wasn't it said that only those born with spiritual roots could cultivate? Director Kim explained that for an ordinary person, the stage known as 5 energies converging to the origin was equivalent to the 5 elemental spiritual root that natural cultivators were born with. He explained to Seo that in order to acquire the trait that cultivators are naturally born with, mortals like them must dedicate their entire lives to simply awaken that basic foundation. As he spoke, Director Kim swung his blade and tore open the fabric of space itself, forming a glowing door in midair. While stepping through that portal, he turned to Seo and said that he must now aim for greater heights. Before disappearing, he handed Seo a book, saying, "This is my final gift to you." He told Seo to stay well, and vanished before Seo could utter a word. Seo looked at the book's title, Record of Transcending Cultivation and Exhausting Martial Arts. It was a manual, a record of one man's attempt to reach beyond cultivation through martial prowess. Worried, Seo gazed up into the sky and softly asked, "Where are you going, Director Kim, without me?" But no answer came, and the days continued on. 50 years had now passed since Seo arrived in this world, and once again, he was on his deathbed from a common cold. Such was fate. No matter how fiercely humans fight, they cannot defy destiny. In the end, nothing really changed except the bed and house in which he lay. He passed away on the exact same day as in his former life. This time, he had lived without holding back, hoping to avoid the same regrets from before. He was so absorbed in his duties that he had never even considered marriage. Still, thanks to that drive, he had united all of Yengua's martial sects and experienced worldly fame and riches. But even so, a hollow emptiness remained in his heart. He wondered, if we had pushed even harder, could Director Kim and I have broken through to the sky itself? Seo's frail body trembled beneath the weight of such regret. It was too painful to accept. And so, the curtain fell on Seo's second life. What happens next? Stay tuned, the next part is coming soon.